this is Adrian Alex Paul. Welcome to another video of great writing tips to become a great writer. Tip number 2, don't be afraid to come up with 10 bad ideas before you finally think of that one great idea. Now, I'm sure you've encountered this when you're writing. You're sitting down, you're getting ready, and you put nothing on the paper because you are too busy thinking of how to be perfect. And instead of thinking of just any idea that comes in your brain and jotting it down and then evolving it into a great idea, you are, blocking everything out which could potentially be a great idea or an okay idea. Even bad ideas that, like I said, can turn into great ideas because you're worried about being perfect. And when you finally jot some down on the paper, you look back at it and be like, well, it's actually not that perfect. And you wasted all the ideas you could have had and turned into something great. Think of it like an inventor. When they finally came up with that one great invention, great idea that, they patented, they sold it, and they became rich, and their invention changed the whole world. Well, before that one great idea, they thought of 100 bad inventions that they tried out and failed. But because they tried all them ideas, they took the great parts of those bad ideas, evolved it into the perfect, greatest invention that finally worked. So think of it like that when you're writing. So let's expand on this tip. So when you're getting ready to write something, think this in your brain. Just write something, anything. Instead of staring at the page and waiting for that great idea to come or to be absolutely perfect, just write something. Put something down on the paper so then you can look at it and then go from there. You need a starting off point instead of a blank piece of paper. It's better to create something from already having something down instead of creating something from nothing. I always found that, So, when you're thinking about it, instead of trying to be perfect, because if you overthink it and you wait too long, the creative juices are flowing, but then you waited too long and then you get a writer's block or the creative juices run out and then you're just staring at the blank piece of paper that you started out with, as opposed to staring at something that you have written on the piece of paper that, yes, might not be perfect, might not be the greatest idea of all time, but it's something, a starting off point. I'm sure you heard this phrase before, KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Everybody's always worried about it's too simple, it's too easy, it's dumb. Don't be afraid to be dumb. First of all, if you're writing your, first draft or whatever it is, no one's going to be reading it unless you let them read it later. But in the moment, you could literally write anything. No one's going to see it. There's nothing to be worried about. So usually the most simplest idea is the best idea. Instead of overcomplicating, overthinking, it's usually the first idea that pops in your brain, no matter how dumb, how simple, just is usually the best idea. And, keep it simple, stupid is that concept. Just, start off easy, then get deeper, more complicated, more in-depth, all that. What I like to come up with is write like a kindergartner. Don't overthink it. Don't be some, scientific genius. Just get something down on the paper. And then, yes, a kindergarten, wrote it. And, they usually say, oh, it looks like a kindergarten could have done this. Okay, well, then build off that. And eventually move your way up to, a high school student, a graduate, whatever. So, you know what I'm saying? It's like a concept. And sorry about the noise in the background. There's some guy chopping down a tree with a chainsaw. Can't do nothing about it. So, alright, so this is something that I kind of came up with. So usually when you're writing a screenplay or I guess a book or anything and you have your first draft, well, what I like to do, or call it before my first draft, is I call it a pre-draft. Now my pre-draft, anything goes. It doesn't matter how dumb, how simple, how ridiculous. Like, I don't even take it serious when I write it. I just get something down on the paper, because that is very important. So if you're too worried about, like, oh, well, this is my first draft, I can't make it that dumb, I can't make it that simple, because it's the first draft, but then the second draft is like really important, which is like the draft before my final draft. So if you're like psyching yourself out that way, thinking that the first draft is too important, okay, write a pre-draft. Now, literally a pre-draft could be a scribble, could be like the dumbest thing ever. Like, write from beginning to end your movie or your book, but don't really take it serious. Just get something down, and then take that, what you've written down, and then get a little bit more serious and write your first draft. Because like I said, it's better to write from a starting point, from something, than to write, from nothing. To write your first draft from nothing, okay, like, I get it, but think of it like a pre-draft where you're writing a bunch of bullet points, a couple of notes. It's not really full sentences. It's not really a full dialogue. Maybe it's a couple of ideas of dialogue, but it's basically beginning to end. Fade in, fade out. Then take those ideas and start your first draft. Because I noticed with me, when I write that pre-draft, I look back at it and I'm like, yo, literally like some handicapped mental person must have wrote this, because I didn't write this. It can't be possible for me to write something so dumb or so not take it serious. And I look back at what I wrote, I'm like, this can't be me. This just has to be a different person with a different personality. But then something like magic happens when I take that ridiculous stuff that I wrote in the pre-draft, and then I sit down, I get a little bit more serious, and I write my first draft. If you compare side by side my pre-draft, which I, think of it as a joke, just whatever I can put down on the paper, and then compare it to my first draft, it's like two different human beings wrote it. You're like, these can't be the same person. Like, the first draft is written by some graduate screenplay writer that, or some screenplay writer that is starting out in Hollywood, compared to the pre-draft where literally some kid scribbled some characters down on a piece of paper and wrote some dialogue and had a beginning, middle, and an end, if you can even call it that. So, I don't know, something happens to me mentally where my pre-draft is trash, but compared to my first draft, because I started out with something, it's like total night and day. So try that out, because it worked for me. Some other points I want to point out. Your best work evolved from the bad ideas, like I mentioned with the inventors. Like, usually it's very rare where your first idea is usually the best, greatest idea, and it's perfect, and you don't touch it, and you don't evolve from it. No, you start out with a horrible idea, a mediocre idea, a somewhat okay idea, then you build off that, and it eventually evolves into the greatest idea of all time. But think of your, favorite screenplay writer, or favorite author. I'm sure Stephen King didn't sit down and the second he typed out, from beginning to end, everything, every dialogue, every character, every description, every pronoun was perfect. He didn't need an editor. He fired his editor. He never hired an editor because he never needed it, because every letter, every word, every punctuation was 100% perfect. Get real. He probably came up with, he wrote the basic, blueprint, and then he built off that. First draft, second draft, third draft, fourth draft, fifth draft. Who knows how many drafts before he got to the final draft. And even when he got to the final draft, he's like, let me write this again. And then he got to a final draft, if you know what I'm saying. So, and then I'm sure he changed some scenes around, or he changed the description of a character and evolved it to a great idea. You get it. So, think outside your box. Stop being afraid to, write something dumb, to write something crazy, to write something like that you normally would not write. That's how you break down that wall, that barrier of being afraid of bad ideas to then get to the good idea. So if you're normally a conservative writer in the sense of oh, I don't want it to be too bloody, I don't want it to be too wordy, I don't want it to be whatever you don't want it to be, make it be that for the first time. And then think of a red line. What's your red line? Cross that red line. Erase that line and make your new red line. And then when you made that new red line, cross that one. Break the box. Smash the box. Just really think of it like this. Take a piece of paper and say to yourself, okay, based on the story that I'm going to write, on this piece of paper, I'm just going to dig deep inside my gut. Dig deep inside the, deepest part of my brain. And no matter how dark and crazy, stupid, anything, for the first time, I'm going to write like I never wrote before. Think outside your box. And probably the two most important things that I want to finish off with is stop being afraid in general. I think that's really the problem with really unlocking your true potential in writing the best book or screenplay or anything, is stop being afraid. The biggest thing in my life that has held me back is fear. Not just in writing, but with anything. And I don't want to get too deep into, the personal life yet, but the things that molded me to be a writer and, the things that affected me through my life was fear and getting over that fear. Stop being afraid in general, but be fearless. Not just when it comes to writing. If you're afraid to be talking to a girl, or afraid to stand up to a bully, or afraid to, go in public, or be around people, or say no to a friend, or go up to a girl and talk to her, or you're afraid to, something that you've always been afraid of doing, I don't know, you're afraid of snakes, then go touch a snake, for example. That'll help you open up. If you're afraid of heights, well then go skydiving. You know what I'm trying to say? Because that's gonna erase your mental fear. It's going to open you up to all new possibilities, to not just your life in general, but when it comes to writing. Be fearless when it comes to writing. You think Quentin Tarantino or Christopher Nolan or whoever your favorite screenplay writer, director, or actor, they have to overcome their fear, So you gotta overcome your fear in writing. Be fearless, because a person who's going to make it in this field is the person usually who's not afraid to just push it yourself, to push it to the limit, to push yourself mentally, physically, to finally come out with that great product. Because all your famous actors and directors and, screenplay writers, yes, I'm sure some of them still have some fear to overcome, but the great ones, they're fearless. But they weren't born fearless. They became fearless by saying, F it. I'm just gonna, put some down on the paper. I'm gonna be the best I can be, and whatever comes my way, I'm just gonna, face it head on and be fearless. So that's the most important tip when it comes to this. Be fearless. Thanks for watching, guys. Please like and share this video, comment down below. If you come up with any types of tips for me to talk about, put in the comments. I'll make a video about it. Hit me up on Facebook and Twitter. Please subscribe. I'm trying to get to 100 subscribers, and I'm really, really close. Hit the notification bell because a lot more of writing videos and tip videos are coming out. So remember my motto, where story comes first.